Welcome to the ESSER III discussion meeting. We're just going to go around real quick and introduce ourselves. My name is Chris Gray. I'm the Director of State and Federal Programs here. And I will be leading this meeting.
My name is Mr. Mark Heath Large. I'm the principal here at Covenant House Academy, Grand Rapids.
My name is Andre Adams. I'm the Dean of Students at Covenant House.
I am Scott Hagedon. I am the behavior interventionist as well as one of the PBIS coaches.
I'm Rebecca Zuckerman. I'm the school social worker.
I'm Jeff Rundhog, one of the social studies teachers.
I'm Chelsea Beckman. I'm one of the math teachers.
I am Robert Carey. I'm also one of the math teachers.
I'm Latanya Harwick, one of the paraprofessionals in this building.
All right. So the purpose of this meeting is, with this newest round of COVID relief money, there's a requirement of having stakeholder input in the planning of the money. So this is one part of that meeting, one part of that requirement. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go over the state and federal COVID relief history, kind of like what we've gotten in the last 2 years. One of the significant details of the COVID funds so far have been their ability to supplant. If you don't know what supplant means, usually with state and federal funds, we can't replace the funding with one of these funds. So like if we don't have a math teacher, we couldn't have a Title I math teacher. We need to have a Title I math teacher, and then we can supplement it with another Title I math teacher. The COVID relief money has allowed us to just, without worrying about supplanting, just help support financially things that would have gotten cut due to all the COVID issues. The next thing we'll do, we'll go over the ESSER survey that we sent out. We'll go over the results. We'll discuss top 3 areas of need based on the survey. And then we'll just go over a quick timeline of the next steps in the process. Any questions on that? All right, so these are the major grants that were received during COVID. In total, it's almost $1 million. So it's a lot of money in the last 2 years. The first grant we got that was called the CRF grant. It was for $107,706. What we did with that, and this was in the 2021 school year, we spent $16,300 on our initial personal protective equipment. We bought humidifiers. We bought spit shields for the classrooms and for the main office. Because we knew we were going to have kids outside standing in line doing the COVID test, we bought tents. And then we also paid for enhanced cleaning, which entailed, I believe, using like a UV light every Friday and some kind of static cleaning device. And then after that, we spent the rest of the money, which was $90,300, on Chromebooks, for the students, laptops for the teachers, the Go Guardian program, which allows us to supervise and work with the students while they're on the Chromebooks. And then for 5 months, when we initially started, we bought hotspots. But we quickly found that that wasn't a very good use of money. They're very expensive. 5 months cost us $3,045. So, I mean, we ended up getting a partnership with Comcast, which was much more cost effective. After that, or part of that, directly from Kent County Health Department, we got another CRF grant for $4,950. That was 100% spent on cleaning materials, such as the masks. We got more masks, and then just the personal protective equipment like gloves, lots of hand cleaner for all the rooms. The next big grant was ESSER I. That came out pretty early on in the COVID. That was for 172,794. That was 100% spent on teacher salaries in school year 2021. The governor then got a grant out of the ESSER money where she was allowed to give to the most high need schools. And from that governor grant, we got 32,741. We spent that 100% on our social worker, Mrs. Zuckerman, to help supplement her pay for the 2021 school year. So ESSER II came out after that. That was $195,926. We spent $966 on more PPE, which is the masks and the gloves and all that. We were able to buy headphones for the students because a lot of our headphones disappeared, and so that they wouldn't have to share. And then we spent $179,379 on teacher salaries in 2021. So a lot of the money in 2021 was spent on teacher salaries, and that's kind of where we're going so far in 21-22, because our numbers were drastically reduced due to the pandemic. We have like 14,973 in ESSER II remaining. We have until June, I think, to spend it, and more than likely that will also be spent on 21-22 salaries. Another program that started last summer was the Section 23B. This came out of the ESSER II money from the state, and it was focused on credit recovery. We earned $30,250 it was based on summer school participation in our students. We used 7,449 of that to pay for the summer school, and then which left us with 21,766 remaining. And that second number is a lot higher now. So this is the money that we're using to pay for our Saturday school moving forward. And then we'll also use any remaining funds, which we'll probably have, to pay for this summer's summer school. And in case you're wondering, it can only be spent on that. That's why this particular pot of money has to be directly associated with credit recovery. So we can't use it to pay for salaries and stuff. We could use it for bus passes and food for the summer school program.
Mr. Gray,
Yeah.
is there a deadline on when that money has to be spent?
Yeah, most of them, almost every single, so 1 through 6 all have a deadline of by the end of next. I take that back. 1 through 5 have a deadline of the end of this school year. So like this summer. 6 and 7 have until next summer. So some of this will probably roll over into the 22-23 school year. That's crazy to think. Yeah, so that gives us to our last pool, which is ESSER III. And then I'll go over this in a minute, but basically the only thing we've officially spent this on is ExactPath, which is a program that we'll talk about in a second. And that was also a requirement. So the ESSER III application, there's three main, there's a couple main parts, all right? What we're doing right now is this first checkbox is that we're engaging in meaningful consultation with stakeholders, and we're giving the public an opportunity to make public input in the development of the plan. And then the bottom two parts says the LEA certifies a safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan, and it'll be posted on our LEA within 30 days of funds being allocated. So we already have a plan. It looks like looks like this. It's on our website. We had 2 of these. Actually, we've had like 3 of these altogether, but like the first one was when we were in hybrid mode. We had to show what we were providing for students, and then we had to update it last year. And this year is a lot briefer. It's just basically going over how we're, maintaining in-person instruction and so that the students are safe. So once we approve this plan we're talking about, we'll have to post a new one within 30 days of the funds being allocated. The last part is the part that I talked about, the exact path, and then we have to certify that we're going to use 20% of our overall funds to address learning loss. And that is due to COVID. So in our plan, some of the items have to be earmarked for that. So this is just kind of like the basic wording from the law, saying that we must engage in meaningful consultation with stakeholders and give everyone the opportunity to input and development of a plan. This is a big difference from that first bunch of money really didn't have a lot of requirements as long as it was something that would be approved under a normal circumstances, it was approved. This round of money there's a lot more oversight. I think it's because politicians probably were saying, hey, we're throwing a lot of money around, let's get some assurances that it's being used for the right things, which is why we have so many more requirements this round. So for our meaningful consultation on January 12th, we sent out a survey to 408 email addresses. Basically, it was all of our staff, all of our students, and all of our board, all of our administrators, and then every student in the school, and then every contact email that was in Power School. So whether it be mom, dad, social worker, whatever was in there, I sent it to all those. It ended up being 408. We got a few responses, and then on 125, I sent out an email reminder saying there was still time to complete it to the 390 that hadn't, and then which led us to where we're at today. We ended up with 25 responses, which is not great, but it is what it is, and we're gonna move forward. So I already explained what this is. This is the 20% for us. Right now, it means 58,670. But when we get the remaining amount of the ESSER, which is like 400, that will obviously 20% will be larger. And basically that 20% needs to be spent on either, I have to choose one of these. So either administering high quality assessments to determine academic needs, which is what ExactPath does, implement evidence-based practices, which is what our MTSS program is, if we choose to go that route. Support students and families in distance learning. This would be where we could buy internet access or Chromebooks, but we're pretty well set on that right now. Or we can track student attendance and engagement during remote instruction. We're also pretty set in that one. Monitor student academic progress to identify students who need more help. I mean, this is basically the main point of most of our jobs. So we're all well deep into that. The next part of the ESSER application asked for just kind of a description of how we would use the ESSER III funds to prevent, prepare, and to respond to coronavirus. Basically, all of the money up through ESSER III, we've used to support our schools' transmission mitigation efforts through the purchase of PPE, and we had purchased most of this stuff up to this point. So basically with ESSER III, we've only used it to kind of stock up. We've used it to replace the filters in our air purifiers and humidifiers. We will purchase more soon. I'm waiting on a inventory update from Mr. Boss. And then we just bought more masks and We bought more cleaning supplies, and we could spend more of that. The funds have also allowed us to have a staffing level to mitigate classroom size by allowing social distancing, by we drastically reduced the seating in every room. And with more staff, it allows us to have more rooms when needed. And it also allows us to have more staff to support those working remotely, which at this point, I think is about between 10 and 20% of our students. How will we use it to promote equity? We put in this quote: researchers have identified that access to well-prepared, effective, and diverse educators and staff and integrated support services can begin to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on students and can close long-standing gaps in educational opportunity. Because of this, that's why we've used so much to keep our staff in place. All right. This is even more important with the at-risk population we serve. The ESSER funds have allowed us to keep our staffing at a level that would have not been possible under traditional pupil funding calculations due to the impact of COVID-19 on our number of enrolled students, which has significantly gone down, almost 100 students since before COVID. Third question wants to know, how are we going to address the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on some subgroups? And the subgroups identified are low-income families, racial and ethnic groups, gender, English learners, children with disabilities, students experiencing homelessness, children and youth in foster care, and migratory students. Because most of our students and families were frontline workers and continue to be, they have suffered a tremendous financial and physical and emotional impact from COVID. We began giving all students a mental health screener upon enrollment to identify students in need. We began a daily mindfulness program in all of the classes to help both staff and students. And during the first COVID shutdown, we provided trauma training to staff, and we're going to continue to do that. And then we purchased the ZAC Path to support our curriculum because it allows us to provide diagnostic assessment and direct instruction to help those close learning gaps and demonstrate positive growth because it works so closely with our Edmonton program. The other thing asked, or the other question asked, how evidence-based programs will be how will these be evaluated? Basically, because we're a Title I school, all of our major program, all of our grant-funded programs are evaluated annually for effectiveness. And we also look at the impact on the same subgroups that the ESSER application is asking about. Same thing with student academic data, where we break it down, usage and course reports and student surveys. We can break all those down into these identified subgroups. Our MTSS PBS program is evaluated by Swiss data, EWI, which is like an early warning indicator, and PBIS. Positive behavioral interventions and supports. There we go. And all of these can be broken down to identify indicators of equity issue. And we do that once a month and every quarter. The last question that the program description asks is how we're going to use this money to support returning students to the classroom. And like we've said multiple times, the majority of our ESSER funds will be used to allow us to keep our staffing at a level to adequately support our students as they are slowly returning to school more and more each month. The low staff student ratio is going to help us keep the safe socially distance. It's going to allow us to use the exact path remediation program with students, help us provide wraparound mental health and material services to students still struggling, and help support students choosing to stay remote. So what can we spend this money on? There's the United States Department of Education has basically said 5 areas. One, 5 questions to ask. 1, will the proposed funds prepare for, and respond to coronavirus? Is it allowable under the CARES Act? 3, is it reasonable and necessary? Does it promote equity? And does it support returning students to the classroom? So we sent out our survey, like I said, to 408 emails. We got 25 responses. It breaks down to this. We had 2 responses from a student, 3 from a parent or guardian, 10 were from our certified staff, 4 were from our support staff, 4 were from our school or district administrators. We had 1 board member respond, and no community partners. Of those 24 responses, we asked, did they represent any of these subgroups? 7, or did they have an interest and represent the interests of students with any of the following needs? So 7 were associated with ESL learners. 9 worked with students experiencing homelessness. 5 worked with students receiving foster care. 10 had represented students with disabilities. 6 students of special populations other than the ones listed above. And then 12 said this was not applicable to their situation. So basically the choices broke down into these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 areas. And then there was an other, which I'll show you. And then we asked the 3 questions. The next 3 questions asked them to rank their number 1 priority. So the number 1 priority was maintaining or increasing teachers, interventionists, and parapros. And I have a overall breakdown after this. The second priority was pretty evenly distributed amongst top 3, but the number 1 was provide mental health support. The third was also kind of evenly amongst the top 3, and it was actually the second and third both were provide mental health support. So what I did is I broke it down like this. I broke it down by how many first place votes, second place votes, and third place votes. And when you break it down like that, our top 3 areas were 1, providing mental health support and counseling with 16 total votes. Number 2 was maintaining or increasing the number of teachers, interventionists, and parapros at 15 total votes. The third was special programs or initiatives to address learning loss through the pandemic with 12 total votes. And then the fourth, because it was so close, I just put it in there, teachers and parapros to support students with disabilities. The one other that was chosen was someone suggested that we purchase tech to raise interest in science. Any questions or observations on these? So if we're going to discuss the top 3 areas from surveys, the number 1 is we have maintained or increased teachers, interventionists, and parapros. This is what we've done from the beginning with most of the money to avoid having to lay off based on our lower numbers. We've used most of this COVID money to support our students. So up to this point, this is what we've used most of the money for. Once we purchased all the PPE and we got all the technology we needed to support the students and staff, the next thing that we've spent most of our money on is maintaining our staff level, which is much higher than our student staff to student ratio would allow us to be under traditional funding calculations. So I guess I've explained to you what we have done. Does anyone think what we could or should do moving forward?
Well, I see the funds available. You know, we could use those to bridge. If it's available into next school year, we could use it to bridge as we try to build back our student population. And that's a major concern, right?
Yeah. So that's one thing that we could do. So it's kind of like we could either help right now or kind of let some of it flow into next year and help next year as well. That's definitely on the table. Anyone else?
I disagree. Flowing into next year because I can, forecast that needed support.
I mean, I can report that our numbers are increasing. They're not increasing as fast as we would like them to increase, but they are slowly increasing. I think kids are getting more comfortable coming back to school. And we're hoping that by the time this year ends, that we're back to our pre-pandemic numbers of enrollment. I mean, this one's kind of straight up, should we or shouldn't we? This question. The next question, though, is a little more openness, because there are so many things in so many ways to define mental health support and counseling. What I had asked Mrs. Z to do is kind of give an update on what we've done so far, because basically she's kind of ridden the COVID wave with the start of her job. I mean, she basically got hired in COVID and has been helping us ever since.
All right, that's my cue. Okay, so I compiled a list of just all the things I could think of that we're doing at this time or have been doing. Our morning mindfulness practices every day on Zoom. The well-being survey is offered to all students. Staff training on trauma-informed practices. I think all staff was trained last summer in crisis prevention and intervention or recertified. So CPI. We have a trauma-informed practices team. We offer referrals and resources from the student services. We also have mental health professionals on staff with myself and Mr. Van Tassel, and soon to be Ms. Lay. We have our PBIS program, Seeking Safety and Ladies of Distinction. So any of those programs with our partners, our community partners that come into the school and work with our students. I think that's all I have, actually. Did I miss anything? Did anyone notice?
Did we talk about how this relates to MTSS and PBIS?
Yeah, I mentioned PBIS. Yeah, so the mindfulness piece really, I think, is connected to where we want to go with social emotional learning. So one of the programs that has come to my attention a couple times is a program called Trails to Wellness. Has anyone else heard about that program? Yeah. It's a social emotional learning program that's based in mindfulness and cognitive behavioral therapy, which is all about in between our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So, there's tons of programs out there. This one seems like it fits pretty well with what we're already doing with our mindfulness practices. So in terms of where we go, that's one idea.
Were you able to figure out any kind of how much does it cost?
Well, I'm actually drafting an email right now. I had reached out to the Kent to someone from the Kent ISD a while back in December, because Kent ISD is using this program with many of the schools in the district, but it's only a limited number of schools, I guess. So she was going to look into us being able to be part of that, but then we never communicated again. So I'm reaching back out to her to inquire.
Well, that's
my
good to
first
hear.
step.
That's good to hear, because sometimes they give discounts when we can bulk purchase like that.
Yeah. So I'm going to reach out to her, and then I can reach out to Trails to Wellness directly and get some more info. But another thing that Mr. Gray and I had chatted a bit about yesterday was also restorative practices training for our staff. So I started looking into stuff today. I didn't have much time to really dig in. So I don't know if anybody knows of any good restorative practice trainings But that's another idea where we could use some of this money for that kind of training.
Are
Anybody
we
else?
switching to the group discussion? Because I was going to
Yeah.
suggest maybe I don't know if this is possible, but we could contract with a counseling firm to bring a counselor into the building just to supplement, because I know that Mrs. Zuckerman is like ridiculously busy, and Mr. Van Tassel dittos that. So if we could just even 1 or 2 days a week have an additional counselor in the building to help our kids, it's just a thought.
Mm.
Or even like a support group.
I was going to piggyback off of Mr. R, and maybe not just have a counselor, because I get that the building of the therapeutic rapport, but have someone that wants to come in and run different types of group counseling sessions. I know we have the Seeking Safety and we have Ladies of Distinction, but if we had a grief counselor who came in and students that are working on grief, because we've dealt with that this year. There's various levels of counseling services that our students could use. Bullying, for instance. I know we in the past have tried to reach out to the Mental Health Foundation of West Michigan for their Be Nice program, and we've kind of had a few hiccups along the way, but I know they really focus on bullying in the school, and it's a program that's used across the state. So I do like what Mr. R said, but I'm wondering if there's more group counseling stuff for the different levels of therapeutic services our students could use, so that frees up Mrs. Zuckerman more for that individual.
I was heading in that direction anyway. To have a counselor come in and build a relationship, but then the funding dries up the next year isn't a good plan. But running some support groups and some I don't know, even just activities that help kids and they don't even realize they're being helped. Those are really good kind of activities to try and have. So yeah, we're in sync there, Scott.
So keep in mind about, don't worry so much about all the funding drying up because of that supplant question that I showed you earlier. Like next year, when this funding's done, we can't use this to pay for salaries across the board like we are. So we'll have to put the money that we will get through the different grants towards things such as this, because this is a need. If we identify this as a need, then that's the whole point of using that money. I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, that's okay. I was just thinking, like, is it possible for like art class or art supplies, some kind of arts programming to fall within the category of mental health supports for the purpose of this funding?
I think art therapy is a thing. You could you could throw art therapy under. There's music.
I was just going to say
therapy.
Music, art. I think that's
there's there's throughout the county. There's even therapy dogs or different animals that are used for therapeutic services that we could look into. I have a past with working with residential, and some of these kids with some serious trauma in their lives have fallen in love with dog therapy or art therapy. So I think thinking outside the box, like Ms. Zuckerman just said, would be super beneficial for our student population.
Not that this works here, but along that same line, Scott, my boys went to horse therapy at the barn for equine learning, and it was awesome for them. So yeah, animal therapy is a really good path to.
And I just going to say I agree as well. Those are items that we used, I think in 2012, 2013. I know that was almost a decade ago, but it still is very pertinent and useful for the now, because trauma has definitely crept into everyone's lives with the pandemic.
What about Ms. Z and I have talked about getting, if we're to up the ante on mindfulness and then this whole trauma, eventually a teacher is going to have to take over as far as implementing it at the classroom level if we're going to do these practices. What if we looked into getting more PD for that, like to have someone be like trainer of trainers type of situation?
Yeah, I think any kind of SEL or mindfulness or, any of those kinds of programs that we try to implement has to be done by those running the classrooms
Mhm.
in order for it to actually be sustainable and really um, like disseminate throughout the school. I think the Trails to Wellness program, like it's lesson plans and stuff. Um, Same thing with the Mindful Schools program. Like once I did that second course, I have a whole thing of lesson plans. Um, so yeah, I guess I'm just saying I agree. Having teachers on board as like leaders of these programs, I think is important.
Anything else before we move on to the last question?
Well, I guess that just leads me to wonder. So then, say we decide to do some kind of program, right? Is it just whoever wants to do the training on the program does it, or is it a school-wide expectation for these kinds of things?
I think that's a twofold question because I think you'd also have to see what the requirements are with, say, if we brought in dog therapy or art therapy, they might have guidelines for who can meet the criteria. So I think probably have to have something on our end, but also honor what they have on their end.
All right, so I wrote down, because I think it's great that if we do go down this path, like how are we going to make sure that it can be supported over time? Like, is it going to be part of our school culture? We just don't want to like pay for a Band-Aid and then not use it, which is what is required of all PD, is that it's sustained and ongoing. And we have gone down this mindfulness trauma path for the last couple of years. So this is something that we have been working at. Any other in the area of mental health? All right, the final one was the special programs or initiatives to address learning loss. So if I'm going to go over what we've done, we bought Exact Path. We have implemented MTSS over the last couple of years. More specifically related to this is the PBIS, which has got a lot of, seems to have gotten a lot of kids buying into school more lately. And then this would also be the area that we would talk about any kind of extra school that we've done, like on Saturday school or summer school would fall into this area. But what else, what else, what other special programs or initiatives in this area, this could be kind of a one or two off, kind of like short-term intervention. Any ideas out there?
Well, I think we could look into the possibility of bringing some tutoring to the school if students need it. I mean, that's what the teachers are for, but sometimes we get a little overwhelmed. So additional, like remediation, I guess is the word I should be using for students who are really struggling with something like math, or I know we have one student who really complains that he can't read and it makes him not motivated. So there's an example of having somebody who could just do some one-on-one with him would be a good option. I also know that there are programs out there, curricula that could be used. We used something with the boys to get them caught up, and it was very effective because it was, I need to bring it in and show it to you all. It's short little articles that they read and then they respond to, and it really worked on like retention and reading for understanding. So those are two things that.
Sorry, I'll throw this out there too. If we're on this topic, it goes right in line with MTSS, and we wouldn't necessarily have to bring anybody new in, but the idea of having a staff be assigned to be like a reading interventionist or a math interventionist with a real program to go with that is something I've always been pushing for.
I am 100% in agreement with you to have those and held accountable for results.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Ray, I was wondering if that were going back to number one with an interventionist, with that, what was just discussed, that three of us are in agreement with, I'm sure most of us are in agreement with that. Would that be with number one or would that be with number three?
I mean, I think, remember that quote that I used from the research that said that one of the ways to really kind of mitigate academic loss is through highly trained people. So yeah, it would fit under 1 and 3, I think.
I agree.
Okay, so where are we going? So our next steps in this process are once we're going to get a draft plan budget about our current needs for remainder of the year. Once we're done with that, we'll provide updates to the stakeholders and give public, the public more another chance to comment on where we're at. And then after we decide and submit it, we'll have to update our continuing learning plan within 6 months of planning to use the funds. And that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't think so. Thank you.
All right. So I guess we will see you all again the next time we have an update. Thanks.